We're very honoured. Thank you very much, Rabbi Hersh, who's very kindly agreed to speak to us this noon. It's still morning, not chatzos yet, as the keynote lecture. So Rabbi Hersh, that's something everyone knows. Rabbi Hersh doesn't really need an introduction. Senior lecturer, Jali, Talmud Chacham, good man, and knows the answers for all of your questions. So please utilise the opportunity. Time for questions, Rabbi. And the title of the lecture is, what is the greatest possible favour you can do for yourself? What is it, Rabbi Hersh? Please tell us.
Come to Shema Bni seminar. Can I go now? Okay. There is a Gemara that contains the following quote. Dorish hahu Galiloi. There was this Galilean, this person in the Galil, in the northern part of Israel, who said to Rav Chisda, we as a nation are blessed because HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God gave us a threefold Torah through the third child. Moshe is the third child of Amram, the youngest of the three children of Amram. On the third day, because we were instructed to prepare for 3 days before the event of the giving of the Torah on Har Sinai, in the third month. So there is an element of praise that is reserved for the fact that the Torah contains 3 elements, that it was given through the third child on the third day of the third month. The idea behind this concept is that we are defining the Torah in terms of what Judaism gives the number 3 as its value. 3 has a value in 2 senses of the word. One, that it is all-encompassing in a way that we will see in a moment. And the second, that it is able to key in to any stage in a person's life that a person is at. And therefore, what this Galilean was pointing out is the gift of Torah wasn't simply something that was shared with the Jewish people, but that it was a gift that enabled my entire life to be bound up within Torah. The idea of the concept of 3 is that it encompasses every area of the expression of life that I have and any stage in life that I find myself at. How do we see this in the practical sense? So, as most of you are probably aware, we generally refer to the soul as having 3 parts: nefesh, ruach, and neshama. Now, in many ways, each of these 3 independently is translated as the word soul. But they actually refer to different interactions, different spiritual elements, to spiritual values that are connected to Hashem, depending on which part I am emphasizing, which part I am relating to. The nefesh is the most physical. The Torah tells us in Parshas Re'eh, ki hadam hu hanefesh, that we literally compare that element of the soul to the blood. The bloodstream animates, gives life to every limb in the body. Were a limb to be starved of blood, that limb would start dying. When we sleep in an uncomfortable position and we wake up in the morning and a particular limb then is given its regular blood flow, What happens is that limb is being brought back to life, hence the sensation that we feel. If that were to happen for a far longer period, that limb would atrophy, would no longer be a part of the rest of the body. And therefore, the blood is that which animates my ability to do, to walk, to take, to use my physical attributes. The blood is that which symbolizes the action element of the human body. So to the nefesh, that element of the soul, relates to all the physical mitzvahs that I carry out. When I am doing something with my body, which is positive, when I'm carrying out a mitzvah, it is the nefesh element that is engaged in the performance of the mitzvah. And the converse is true as well. When a person does an avera, it is the nefesh that sins. Hence, in Parashas Vayikra, when we are told of the concept of sin, it says, v'nefesh kisechta. It is that element that is involved, that is engaged in the sin, because it is an action-based area of involvement in spirituality, whether negative or positive. The level above that is called the ruach. Ruach, by definition, has a translation which is somewhat vague. Ruach can mean wind. Ruach can mean direction. Ruach, therefore, is something that changes. It moves. Ruach is located within the heart and within speech. It's within the element of the body that is not action-based, but yet has an impact on my actions. It is, what do I desire? What do I really want? What is my motivation? Not what do I do, that's the nefesh, but what causes me to do things. As we say in the Shema, "V'lo sasuru acharei levavachem," do not stray after your hearts, v'acharei einechem. Your eyes are simply being fed by that which your heart desires. If you desire to do that which is positive, then what you will see will give you positive opportunities. Whereas if your heart is captured by the Yetzer Hara, then when you look around you, the opportunities that you see and that you will eventually act upon are negative ones. So the heart, the emotions, the desires dictate what the actions will be. And therefore, it is an element that is not related to the dam, to the physical activity itself, but rather to that which I say and to that which I feel, that which I express. The level beyond that, the level higher than that, is the neshama. The neshama is located within the intellect. And that is why, in the morning brachos, we talk of the idea, Elokai neshama shenasato bi tahirahi, that our neshama comes back to us. We didn't die overnight, but we experienced a period of time where the neshama did not reside within our body. And hence, we wash our hands in the morning as a form of tchias hamesim, as a form of bringing something back to life. But it doesn't mean that we existed without life. It means we existed without the neshama. And it's quite understandable why it should be specifically the neshama that leaves us at night, as opposed to the ruach and the nefesh, because the neshama is that element that is not active when we are asleep. Our intellect, our thought process, our decision-making doesn't happen when we are asleep. So that which is in the realm of thought is absent during the night. And that is why, for instance, the Chazon Ish says nowadays that almost all dreams that people have They don't have to be concerned if they were negative dreams, because they are not a product of the neshama. They are not a product of a thought-based process of what would have been in the olden days nevuah. It is simply coming from the ruach and the nefesh. It is coming from the lower parts of the soul, and therefore it's affected by the body. It's affected by the physical side of my day, and by the state of feeling, the matzav haruach that I am in. If I'm feeling anxious, so my dreams will betray anxiety. It has nothing to do with the fact that God has decided to bestow prophecy upon me. It is simply an outcome of that which is on, we would say in English, on my mind. I suppose in this context we would say it's simply that which is weighing upon me and expresses itself through the dreams when, in fact, the neshama is absent. So therefore, these three elements, nefesh, ruach, and neshama, define what I am. It defines my thought process, it defines my desires and ambitions, and it defines my actions, my activities. Torah relates to all of these three. Torah is not simply an intellectual process. Torah is something which encompasses every element of my existence. And hence, in the brachas over Torah that I make in the morning, there are three brachas, and they relate, each one, to one of these three elements. The first is, Asher gitshanu b'mitzvayso v'tzivonu la'asik. We are asked to toil, to engage, to work within Torah. That's the nefesh element. That's the physical element. That I have to expend blood, sweat, and tears over the acquisition of Torah. The second bracha is v'ha'arevno, that God should sweeten Torah to me. We don't find that as a bracha to any other mitzvah. That before we enter the sukkah, we say, God, as part of the bracha, sweeten the mitzvah of sukkah, the performance of the mitzvah. We say it specifically with Torah because this is the ruach element. This will define the direction that I take. If it's sweet, if it's something I want, if it's something I enjoy, I am likely to bring my whole sense of being in line with Torah because it's something that I enjoy. That's the second bracha, v'harevna, that's the ruach, the direction that I will take. And finally, there's the concept of Shebachar Banu. God shows us that's a state of being. I'm not doing anything. I'm not deciding anything. That is my core identity. Asher bochar banu. That's the element of the neshama. It is. It's not dependent on something that I do or a decision that I make. And therefore, this Galilean was saying, the praise of HaKadosh Baruch Hu giving us Torah is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us the ability to interact with Him at all times, whether it's something that I do, something that I desire, or something that I think about. And similarly, the Aseres HaDibros, they contain two halves. The first five are Ben Adam Lamokim, between man and God, and the second half is between man and fellow man, Ben Adam Lachaveroi. In both cases, in each set of five, I have a mitzvah that relates to my thought process, a mitzvah that relates to the state of speech or desire, and a mitzvah that relates to activity. So you start with, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am your God, says Hashem. If somebody puts a gun to your head and says, I want you to believe, and if you don't believe, I will kill you. So you say to them, I believe. Do you? Well, there's absolutely no way of checking up. There's absolutely no way of knowing if indeed you do or don't believe. It is a completely internal, neshama-based process, whether I am or am not a believer. So is true for the second of the Aseres HaDibros, Lo yeh lecha, not to have any other God, not to believe that there is any other power. The third of the Aseres HaDibros is Lo yisisa Hashem Hashem Elokecha lashav, not to take God's name in vain. Here we have moved from the element of thought to the element of speech. And then you have the fourth of the Aseret Dibros, to keep Shabbos. There we're already defining inactivity, the lamates melachos, what you can and can't do. So we've gone from thought to speech to action. Take the other side. We start with not being able to murder, to commit adultery, to kidnap. These are all action-based. That's 6, 7, and 8. Number 9 is loisana breacha eit shoker, not to give false testimony. So we've gone from action to speech. And what's the 10th? Not to desire. Loisachmoid. Where is that? That is something that I think about, but it's not something that I act upon per se. And therefore, in both sets of the Aseret Dibros, you go through this entire encompassing connection to God, which incorporates my thoughts, my speech, and my actions. Why? Because in order to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it has to be something that encompasses my entire lifestyle. Now, this is also seen within the elements of Avodas Hashem, or the elements of connection, as defined almost psychologically. There are areas that exist bein Odom lachaveri, between man and fellow man. There are areas that exist bein Odom lamokim. But there's a third area, bein Odom la'atzmai, working on my own personal growth. All of those three exist within the mitzvahs that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us. And with this in mind, we understand that when we received Torah, we received something that will relate to us wherever and whenever. The idea of looking at life through rose-tinted glasses. Instead, what we do is we look at life through Torah-tinted glasses. You can't buy them in the average optician. The only place they are available is within the book. The Torah gives you the means to look at any question that comes your way. Whether that question is one that affects something that's obviously religious, can I eat this or can I not eat this? Or whether it is a question that there are other considerations. Where should I live? Is it healthy for me to live in place X, Y, and Z? Now, there'll be considerations of parnasa and affordability of housing and various other things that come to create the entirety of the cheshbon. Animating all of those decisions has to be Torah. I remember many years ago, this must be, at least 20 years ago, there was a debate in the JC. Not a newspaper that I read, but somebody showed me the article. This was before the time where it was on the internet. And it was a debate between two people who both called themselves rabbis, although, as you will soon hear, one of them is not worthy of the title. And the debate was as follows. You are given the question about where you can live. You have two choices. You define yourself as a modern Orthodox rabbi. You now have two choices. You can live in Meir Sharim, or you can live on a completely secular kibbutz. Those are the only two choices you have. What do you choose? So one of the rabbis answered, listen, I don't have a lifestyle in common with those Jews living in Meir Sharim, but I need a shul, I need kosher food, I need a mikveh. So there's no question about if those are the only two choices where I lived. The other, quote-unquote, rabbi saw politics as so important in their life that it trumped their ability to live a Torah lifestyle. They would do without a minyan, they would, survive on water, etc., etc., in order not to have to live with people whose political views or perhaps even religious views they disagree with, right? We reject completely the second opinion. What we are saying is the lens of Torah needs to be able to have an input in the final decision-making of any action that I undertake, however mundane it is. And this is what this Galilean was telling us. Not only that it has to make an impact on the decisions that I make, but that it is able to do so because Torah relates to all elements of my life and of my lifestyle, wherever and whenever. And with this in mind, we understand the Gemara in Pesachim. The Gemara is a quote from Rav Yosef, one of the Amoraim, one of the sages of the Gemara, who on this day of Shavuos would celebrate particularly. And he said, Ilmale hayoma, if not for this day, kamo Yosef ika b'shuka. How many Yosefs are there in the marketplace? What he seems to be saying is, he was Rav Yosef, but without Torah, he would just be Joe. He would just be some bloke. What would his life mean? What value would his life have if it didn't have Torah? That's what he seems to be saying. Except he's expressed himself quite unusually. He didn't say, if not for Torah, if not for that day, if not for Torah, I would be just a bloke in the marketplace. He said, Kamo Yosef ika b'shuka. How many Yosefs would there be in the marketplace? What is he referring to? The idea that without Torah, how do I react to an event, to a question, if I have no guiding principles? So how do I react if something comes my way? Somebody knocks on the door and wants charity, and I am not in any way animated by Torah whatsoever. So how do I respond to the individual who's knocked on the door? It depends on my mood. If I'm in a good mood, I'll give him some money. If I'm in a bad mood, I'll slam the door in his face. Right? What has it got to do with where I am at that moment in time? Which means that on one day, I can be very kind, and on the second day, very miserly. On one day, I can treat my immediate family well, and on the next day, I can treat them very badly. Because what is the principle that makes me react? My own selfish being at that moment in time. Which means that the very same person, depending what time of day you get to them, before or after their first coffee, or, how hard a week they've had, that will depend on how they react. And therefore, the same person is 16 different people. They could keep a psychologist in business for decades. Right? Never mind schizophrenia. They are split into 16. And each one of them plays a role in their life. When Torah exists, there is one lens through which my life exists. And admittedly, sometimes it tells me to rejoice because it's Purim, and sometimes to mourn because it's Tisha B'Av. But that's all because it's coming from that same place. When it refracts into the prism of light, you get all the colors of the rainbow. But it's coming from one place. It's light. Light, as seen in different situations, is seen in a different way. But it is one. And therefore, says Rabbi Yosef, if not for the fact that Torah existed in my life, I would be Kamo Yosef. I would be many manifold manifestations of this guy, Yosef. Yosef on a Monday, Yosef on a Wednesday, Yosef when it's sunny, Yosef when it's raining. I would be all these people. Ilmone hayome, if not for that day, for Torah, which gave me a singular value, which is able to inform all areas of my life. Exactly the idea that Hai Galiloi, that this Galilean pointed out to Rav Chisda. There is also another way of understanding Rabbi Yosef's opinion, and that is, there are different ways that we relate to the acquisition of items in Torah, a kinyan, making an acquisition on something in Torah. There are different ways in which you can make this kinyan. One of them, which is clearly not the ideal, is if a person steals something. If they steal something, they have acquired it. It's now in their own domain. But obviously it doesn't belong to them. But they have nevertheless taken it as their own. There will, however, come a stage, after they've stolen it, where the mitzvah now upon this thief is no longer to give back the item they stole, but to give back the value of the item that they stole. The Torah tells us, "V'heshiv es hagzela asher gozal." You shall return the stolen object that you stole. Well, all you really needed to write was, "V'heshiv es hagzela." You will return the stolen object. You stole it, give it back. Why does the Torah have to say, no. "V'heshiv es hagzela," return the stolen object that you stole? Why else would it be a stolen object if it wasn't that you stole it? It's a double expression, it's tautological. Why does it say es hagzela asher gozal? Says the Gemara, because there comes a time within the life cycle of this item that it is no longer the item that you stole. It's now been changed. It was a piece of wood, and you've now turned it into a table. At that stage, the thief no longer has the obligation to give back the wood. They have to give back the monetary value of what they stole. Because there has been what's called a shinui. Shinui maisa, there's been an action that has taken place that has changed the item, and it's no longer the item that I stole. And therefore the obligation is now monetary, not actual.
In that case, the table could then be worth more.
It could be. Yeah, it could be that because I put in a lot of effort to it, that I now have improved the value of the item. All I have to do, what the obligation on the thief to do is to return the monetary value of the item that they stole. Right? We don't cause them the hardship, so to speak, of giving the table back. Why? Says the Gemara, because otherwise they never would do it. If that's what it would take, the Gemara gives the classic example. If I took a piece of wood and I made it the central beam of my house, and now I have to give it back and pull my house apart for it, I'd never do it. So in order to ensure that tshuva can happen, the Torah relaxes the rules. It doesn't relax what the defendant, or sorry, the plaintiff needs to have in terms of justice. The financial acquisition of the item still requires a returning of its full value to the person it was stolen from. But you don't have to give the actual item back. Why? Because it went through shinui maisa. It went through a change in action. Now there's another type of change that can happen. It's called shinui hashem, if the name changes. The Gemara gives an example. I steal hadassim for my lulav and esrog. I go into a field and I steal a hadas, and then I put it within my arba minim. So initially it was just a growing plant. It now is forming part of a mitzvah. It's a hadas shel mitzvah. It has changed its name. This also creates a change. Who is the person in the Gemara who introduces this idea to us? That not only when you change an item physically, is it a new item, but even when you change its name, it's a new item. The author of this statement is none other than this same Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, if the name changes, the item has utterly changed. And therefore Rav Yosef said, on that day on Har Sinai, our name became Yisrael. God's name was linked to ours. The last two letters of the word Yisrael are God's name. And from that time on, for all time, we have gone through a Shinui Hashem. We have changed our name. And that name can never revert. And that means that the gift of Matan Torah, as the slogan goes, it's a gift that keeps on giving, It is something that is permanent. It is now a change that can never be erased. Whoever, whatever, whenever, Yisrael, afal pi shechota, a Jew, even if they have sinned, Yisrael who? Of course they have to deal with sin. They have to deal with that which they've done. They still have to give back the financial value of that which they've stolen. That doesn't change. But this is now a changed item. We are a changed people. So what happened on Matan Torah is that forever we were given the opportunity to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a way which is utterly unique. This gift is given to us through Torah. So not only is Torah all-encompassing, not only is Torah something that relates to my nefesh, my ruach, my neshama, relates to my physical existence, relates to my existence in terms of my relationship with myself, with others, and with God, but it is a permanent change. It's a change that exists within each of us. And this is in fact why the following event happened, which all of you are aware of, but which still needs defining. At Har Sinai, God spoke to us. And then what happened? We died. And then what happened? God brought us back to life. And then God spoke to us again. And we died again. And God brought us back to life again. And then Moshe took over. Right? And Moshe gave us the other 611 mitzvahs. Which is why, as the Gemara in Makkas tells us, Torah tziva lanu Moshe. Moshe taught us Torah. Torah has a numerical value of 611. Because 611 out of the 613 mitzvahs came from Moshe, and Shnayim Piyam Gvura Shamanu. The other two we heard from God. Well, it was great, but, it didn't last very long. We heard, we died, we were brought back to life, we heard, we died, and brought back to life again. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu put us through it? HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew it would be impossible for us to experience the word of Hashem, in other words, pure, directed prophecy, without having the vessel to contain that prophecy. It's plugging in a 50-watt light bulb into the electric generator. It's just going to absolutely blow in a nanosecond. It cannot contain that voltage. It can't contain that element of revelation, of energy from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So why do it? HaKadosh Baruch Hu, without any doubt, knew what was going to happen. So just give all of Torah through Moshe. And the answer is that there is no comparison between somebody who has never heard God and somebody who heard God but died and was brought back to life. Because somebody who heard God's voice and died and was brought back to life has for all time imprinted on their soul the voice of God. And therefore it's utterly incomparable. Had Moshe conveyed Torah 613 mitzvahs to us, admittedly we would have known all of Torah. But our soul would never have experienced God. And now we did. Forever. Because every one of our souls was at Har Sinai. Which means, in the same way as the name changed us forever, the experience of that day allowed us to have HaKadosh Baruch Hu permanently imprinted on our soul, so that there is an inner voice that allows us to understand what is truth. The gift of Torah was not just the gift of a lifestyle, which in itself is an amazing gift. That every element of my life is relatable to Torah. It's more than that. It's the fact that the concept of emes, of truth, was permanently imprinted upon me. And this also relates to another famous Gemara that you are all aware of, the Gemara in Niddah, that tells us that in embryo, while the child is a fetus, the child is taught all of Torah, and then all of that Torah is removed from them. They forget it all. What is the purpose of doing it? So that it's there. It's there in theory. And now when I learn Torah, I'm rediscovering it. So too our souls have heard HaKadosh Baruch Hu's voice. It is there permanently as part of who we are. And, yep.
Before you said that, I was just thinking, if that's the case, that you have it in the room, then why would you need it at Matan Torah?
One is my individual knowledge of Torah. The Torah that will relate to my particular life. And one is the macro concept that there is only one God and there's no other power in existence. That which is known as Ein Od Milvadai. Nothing exists other than Hashem, and Hashem is the totality of existence. That's what happened at Har Sinai. What happens with the angel is that Torah is taught, the specifics that relate to me and my life is what's taught to me. Now, this idea of something that encompasses an area that allows me to relate whenever and wherever is also true of Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim is made up of two words, Yira and Shalem. They are almost opposites to one another. One is the concept of awe, fear, and one is the concept of peace, of harmony. Somebody who is in awe of another individual isn't that friendly with them. They're not going to slap them on the back, say, how's it going? Right, this is the king you're talking about. So if the relationship is one of Yira, it can't be one of Shalem. Or can it? So the truth of the matter is that Yerushalayim encompasses both. Yerushalayim tells us that our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu through that city is defined by both of these elements. And that, like many things in life, there are two almost contradictory things that come to play its role in the making of the whole. And therefore, there is a city which allows absolute unity. It allows one connection through one Beis HaMikdash, through one Kohen Gadol. There is a unity that is brought about in Yerushalayim, and the Gemara says that no one ever complained and said, Tsar li hamokim sha'olin b'Yerushalayim. I do not find my place in Yerushalayim. Everyone has a home in Yerushalayim. There is no possibility for somebody to not find their place there. Why? Because it's a place of shlemus. It's a place of shalom. It's a place where ultimate harmony, ultimate peace comes to rest. And that is why it is so disputed in the world today and for the last 2,000 years. Because it holds out the gift of absolute shalom, and therefore the rest of the world, in attempting to take it from us, will do anything to prevent that shalom taking place, to prevent that real shalom happening. So it is a place of absolute achdus. That's the shalom element of it. On the other hand, Bahar Hashem Yirah, 3 times a year, the Jews were told to go to the Beis HaMikdash to fulfill the mitzvah of Re'iyah. What did they have to do? They turn up in the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash. They place themselves exactly opposite the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies, and they bow down in the Beis HaMikdash. They brought a korban and various other things, but this was the mitzvah of Re'iyah. There's Oilas Re'iyah, which is the offering that they bring. But the actual mitzvah of Re'iyah, the mitzvah of Aliyah to the Beis HaMikdash, was to place yourself opposite the Kodesh HaKadoshim and bow down to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to submit everything that you are to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That also is integral to Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim contains within it 2 very different narratives, created at 2 moments in time, one of which allows me to understand that inherently I am part of this story. It is impossible that I do not have a place in Yerushalayim, in this city. At the same time, I have to understand that conducting this whole orchestra, that making it all happen, is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's the Yira element. And therefore, Yerushalayim is called Klilas Yofi, the perfection of beauty. Beauty in Judaism is the idea of bringing together different opposite elements into one picture. Right? I'm not talking about modern art. Modern art nowadays consists of a completely blank canvas. And you have to think what it is. And you pay £40 million for looking at a blank canvas and thinking, which is an interesting way of making money, but has nothing to do with art. Art, as defined when people understood what art was, is the bringing together, the blending of almost opposites, or actual opposites, into one whole, and bringing about thereby a greater result than were each of these elements to be retained on their own. The fusion of opposites and the building through it of something greater is what we call beauty. And therefore, in the elements of us relating to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the concept of chesed and gevura. Chesed is the concept of giving. Gevura is the concept of self-discipline, of holding yourself back. They are opposite to each other. One is being out there, and one is holding yourself back from venturing. The fusion together, it only works if there is tiferes. If there is a blend of beauty that is created by having both of them together. The classic example of this is given to us in the Torah. Rainfall. Rain is an act of chesed, is an act of giving. It brings life. If there isn't a limitation on rain, it will turn into a flood. Only if there is the giving of rain and the limitation of the stopping of the rain, the gevurais hagashomim, the imposing of a limitation on it, can you have growth. Only when you have those two opposite elements together, the giving and the abrupt bringing to an end of that giving, do you have the ability of the outcome of Tiferes. And therefore, when in Parashas Noach, the Torah talks about the flood, it talks Vayhi Geshem. It started out as rain. And it depended on the people. If they weren't going to react positively to it, then it became Vayhi Mabul. But initially, it could have been rain. Had we stopped it, had we imposed a limitation, it would have been rain. If there are no limitations, if there are no limits, then it's purely destructive. And this concept of understanding how the Torah infuses my life at any stage is also the meaning of the Gemara that says that when it comes to Sukkot and Pesach, there is a debate in the Talmud as to how I should spend the days of Yom Tov. Should I spend them purely in the service of God, or should I also spend them in the service of my own pleasures? When it comes to Shavuos, when it comes to this Yom Tov, Hakol Moedim, everybody agrees. Everybody agrees in this debate between the two Tanoim, that the day has to be spent Chatzi Lashem v'Chatzi Lachem. Half of it being devoted to God and half devoted to myself. Why? Because Shavuos is a day where I celebrate the fact that everything that is God has an impact on my physical life. And that, in fact, is why on Shavuos there are no unique mitzvahs. On Pesach, matzah, chometz, on Rosh Hashanah, shofar, Yom Kippur, fasting, whatever. On Shavuos, there are no biblical or even rabbinic mitzvahs that are unique to Shavuos. There are all the festival halachas. That applies to any festival. But unique to Shavuos, everything we do is a minhag. whether it is the reading of Rus, whether it's having milk products, whether akdomos, whatever we do in shul, at home, all of it is custom-based. There are no halachas unique to Shavuos. Why? Don't make the mistake of thinking that Shavuos is a day, once a year I hear shofar, once a year I keep Torah. Torah was given on that day, but what did it give us? Everything. The outcome of Shavuos is that I now have life. Kihem chayenu. What Torah has given us is the ability to breathe an oxygen that is not based on the physical elements, but on the spiritual elements. And that is why we have a custom, once again, this is a custom, not a halacha, that we stay up and we learn on the night of Shavuos. Why? So there's a medrash that tells us that on that night of Shavuos, initially in the desert, the Jews went to sleep. And they woke up and it was into the day already of Shavuos. Now, it's very difficult to understand that a nation that has spent 7 weeks preparing for this event, that has spent 3 days in intense preparation, that has just said Na'aseh v'nishma, that they all went to sleep. Nobody bothered getting up early, setting an alarm clock. No one was so excited by what was going to happen the next morning that they couldn't sleep. Everybody went to sleep. What's going on? So I saw an idea from the Bavitcher Rabbi. He said as follows. He said they deliberately went to sleep. This wasn't an accident. What they wanted was that their neshama would be able to access places unencumbered by the body. We started off by saying what happens at night. The neshama element of our soul leaves us. We're left with the nefesh and the ruach. The neshama element is up there and comes back the next morning. But it's now unencumbered by all the physical elements of our existence, of all the desires, of all of those things that would perhaps lead us astray. The neshama is able, if you look in the Zohar, it talks about how it is able to walk through the various hallways of Gan Eden. It's great. What Klal Yisrael wanted to do on that day is receive Torah in the ultimate manner, a manner that's completely unencumbered, undisrupted by the physical. And therefore they went to sleep so that the neshama could experience Torah at its highest level. It was a mistake. Why? Because the whole point of us being given Torah is so that we live our life with Torah. Not so that when we are in a state of nirvana on a mountaintop somewhere, that at that particular moment, then I experience Torah. But the other 364 and 3/4 days of the year, Torah is not relevant. No. Torah is relevant to every moment of my life. And the last thing you want to do is create an artificial scenario in order to be able to fulfill Torah. We need to understand that Torah exists wherever and whenever. And therefore, we need to live a life where we don't feel that Torah can only be accessed at rare moments. Torah is available for us however involved we are in our physical daily livelihoods. Torah is relevant at all times, in all places. And in many ways, it is precisely the Torah that we fulfill through the physicality that creates the greatness of Torah. Because when Moshe Rabbeinu ascended Har Sinai, as the Gemara in Shabbos Peches tells us, the Malachim, the angels, refused to give Torah to us. They said to God, you're making a mistake. You're giving this Torah to a physical people. And Moshe Rabbeinu convinced the Malachim that precisely because we have a Yetzer Hara, because we have the ability to sin, when in the physical world we do the opposite, when in the physical world, instead of sinning, we deny that motivation, we instead do that which is correct in the most physical of circumstances. That is why specifically we should be given Torah. That was the convincing argument that allowed Moshe to be given Torah. because that makes Torah greater than a purely spiritual, call it intellectual process, which is completely divorced and devoid of the life that we live for 99% of our existence. Torah infuses everything that we are and everything that we do. Torah that was a gift that was given to us permanently. And Torah allowed God's name to be linked to us forever. Leave it there.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Hersh. Everyone says so well the whole morning. Those are no impressed.
Now you have to wake them up.
Yeah, go. Thank you everybody for coming to the pre-Shavua seminar. Hope you enjoyed it, and always appreciate feedback. So please send us a message with some feedback. Was appreciated. For those who ordered, there's pizza and chips we're going to have in here, so we could just could put some tablecloths down, so we could ask someone just to lift the sheets and take off the bottles. And we've got pizza chips for the adults and the kids, and to be noisy in here, everyone's welcome. So otherwise, please look on our website for up-to-date things, what's happening. There's a Shavous lunch for those who live in the locality, with Rabbi Breitowitz from Osmech is the guest speaker here in the JLE over Shavous, and Shema Bni have him as the guest speaker on second day Shavous lunch here, which everybody's invited to. Please know if you'd like to join. Everybody have a wonderful Yom Tov. And be zoicha to kabel the Torah b'simcha b'yava.
Amen.